Hey, let's start it off with a cheers.
All right.
Cheers, guys.
We're diving right in. 77 Golden Ale, the only appropriate beer for this interview as far as I'm concerned. So, as we get going, I've got a separate question for each of you as we kick things off. John, I'm going to start with you. In the spirit of manufacturing happy hour, having candid conversations over a drink, simplifying topics, how do you describe what Innovation Alley does as if we're having a beer with one another?
Yeah, I think the core of Innovation Alley is getting students outside their traditional disciplines and getting them together, getting them learning together, getting them having experiences. At the end of the day, we educate students in these academic silos because that's how higher ed evolved for good reason. But there's a difference between that and what they step out to in the real world. So it's anchored in the idea of business and engineering, but it's not meant to be exclusive. And it's really about applied learning. It's about interdisciplinarity and building, I think, opportunities that create value to the education they're getting at Marquette.
And we're going to get more into Innovation Alley as we get later in the interview. We're going to get more into Blue and Gold Brewing as we get into the interview. But, Jackson, I want to hear your elevator pitch on Blue and Gold Brewing. So same type of question. You bump into someone at the bar and they're like, what's this Blue and Gold Brewing thing that these college students are doing? How do you answer that?
Yeah, I've gotten quite a bit of practice with that so far. So, I think I'd started out by saying it's a student-run business that's kind of created and led by Marquette and Marquette alumni. Legally, obviously, it's a different entity. It's its own company. But I'd say it's a collaboration with the goal of giving students real-world learning experience in the craft brewing industry. And you really get to, I think a really big focus of it is seeing the starting and growth of business and a product from throughout the whole product life cycle. I mean, when we joined up, when I got on board, I mean, the idea was there. The official business hadn't even been filed completely yet. Like, they're like, hey, this is the plan. This is the idea. You guys have to take it and run with it. We don't have anything yet besides you guys and the idea.
Yeah, I'll just add that a lot of students are like, well, what exactly is this going to be? And I'm like, well, here's the general idea, but we're going to kind of build this thing as we go. And I think that's the entrepreneurial experience right there when you think about it.
I was going to say that's a pretty real world experience, given that any entrepreneurial experience is you're like building the plane as it's going down the jetway. So that's about as real world as it gets there.
I should note, after my first conversation with John, when he was saying Brewers, I thought he was referring to the Milwaukee Brewers, the baseball team.
Yes. I could see that being confusing here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we're enjoying this at Broken Bat Brewing, one of the breweries involved in the project. More on that in a second. But, let's go back to you, John, and get a little more baseline around Innovation Alley, right? Because this is really, let's say, the part of Marquette that made this possible. So if you can tell us a little bit more, what's the origin story behind Innovation Alley?
Yeah, I think it's good to know the origin story because it helps show, where the concept started and where it is today. And if you ask a lot of people, they're going to be like, that was that building you're going to build between engineering and business, right? And that's what we wanted, to call it. The concept was have a physical space where these two colleges that in the real world, these fields are colliding all the time. Well, they could collide during an undergraduate, or a graduate education. Obviously, campus space use and all those things and, building new buildings and capital projects are not necessarily a straightforward matter on a university campus. But this idea never kind of went away. People really grasped to it. We had some supporters that were philanthropically supportive of the idea. And so what you saw for a long time were programs in the spirit of Innovation Alley developing in the various colleges. So just an example is the E-Lead program that has really grown within the engineering school, focused on innovation leadership, but now is open to all students. That was really an innovation in the spirit of Innovation Alley. You've seen, the executive education group in business create a program called Bridge to Business for Engineers, right? That we know most engineers, they'll go out and as they rise up the ranks in the first couple of years, next thing they realize, I need this business education I never got because I have to understand the connection. So, ultimately where we're at today is, a decision was made to continue to drive Innovation Alley forward, and that was going to be done through an actual position, that was going to lead that initiative and work on it. And I just happen to be lucky enough that that's the role I get to play in every day. So, we're still in many ways young in what we're doing, but we are really focused on, the applied learning opportunities, the multidisciplinarity. And I think what I've seen it creating, and I think this is reflected in the program, is really unique new collaborations that maybe we couldn't quite pursue in the same way before,
Sure.
So we're finding everything from, international companies all the way down to local alumni run and supported breweries who want to do unique things with us. And now we have a really cool opportunity to pursue that.
Yeah, and I wanted to hear the story behind Blue and Gold Brewing as well, because I think one of the interesting things about it is I have my own vision of what the origin story might have looked like. 4 business students sitting around at the college bar being like, you know what, we should start a brewery as a project. So I might be wrong about that. So Jackson, how did Blue and Gold Brewing get started as part of it, like one of the most tangible things I've seen from Innovation Alley so far?
Yeah, I guess it's definitely a little different than most people would expect.
Well, yeah, I got to say, it wasn't quite that different. It's just they were all alumni.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and not current
Oh,
students.
the alumni. Okay.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I just kick it off from the front end. It was the alumni brewers that wanted to do this.
Cool.
Yeah.
They wanted to do this, and we saw it as a unique idea. Not to steal your answer, I'm going to pass it to you. But we said we don't want to just put a label on a can. Like, if we want to make it, uniquely Marquette, like it's got to be a learning experience. It's got to involve students, And so, that was where the idea of could this be a student-run business, really came from, was the idea that we could do this really unique project, but we could really engage the students in it.
Interesting. So I want to hear your side of the story still,
no,
Jackson.
thank you, John. So, it's a weird world we live in today. Twitter.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, my knowledge of the start of this Blue and Gold Brewing began on Twitter, and I think 2 alumni who ended up becoming part of this project and kind of pushing for it saw a tweet from a popular Marquette sports fan who follows Marquette sports and tweets about it. And people are really engaged. And it was a picture of the Panther Pilsner, which is the UW Milwaukee's.
I remember this. Yeah.
Beer on a menu at a bar in Milwaukee, and said, "Hey, why doesn't Marquette have one of these?" And these 2 guys texted each other and were like, "Hey, we should probably try to do something like this." And I as far as I'm aware, to the extent of my knowledge, I think it took them a little bit to find the right people, like John. I think they hit some dead ends and eventually got connected and say these 2 people are the people that will make it happen, and that was John Knapp and Paul Jones. And
what breweries are they affiliated with again?
So one was Tim here at Broken Bat, and the other one was actually Kevin Brower, who works for a company called Flowtech, and he runs kind of one of their sub-market companies called Draft Guard, which is his relevance to the brewing industry.
Yep.
And I think that was really the kickstart.
Yeah, those were the first 2, and then it expanded. So they got going in their network because they know all the other Marquette-affiliated people that work in the beer business, And it ended up then we had a Good City come on board. David was a law graduate, I believe.
Yes.
And then Joe Yato, the founder of Gathering Place, also got connected to us. So we ended up with these kind of anchor breweries in Broken Bat, Gathering Place, and Good City.
Yeah, so with those 3 iconic breweries in the Milwaukee scene, all with Marquette connections, which is also wonderful. A couple things I want to say for our audience out there. I love that this was actually an alumni idea, but they looked at it as, hey, how do we get students involved in this to make it a real-world learning opportunity? I don't know how often that happens in this day and age, but I certainly hope that's something that the listeners out there take away from this that are also, maybe involved in their alma maters and things like that. The other thing is businesses starting on Twitter. It's not the first time I've heard a story like that. I feel like that happens more frequently. Like, funny enough, we're here at a brewery right now, Untapped, the app for checking in the craft beers that you drink. I think that was also like a Twitter conversation that got the co-founders connected. So
interesting.
A lot of real world stuff from this so far. So the alumni were the ones that really kind of got this rolling. How did this get formalized then into an alumni idea that said, hey, let's start taking the steps to make this happen? I guess that would have been getting involved with you, John. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got to give a lot of credit to my coworker, Paul Jones. He immediately got completely fired up about this idea. And he asked me, he's like, do you want to be part of this? And I was like, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And so, we knew making it a learning experience was core. That was what was going to make it a Marquette experience. But then there were questions of how do we even, set this up? And it just, Marquette, we've had student-run ventures in the past, student-run businesses. Like many organizations, COVID kind of, really harmed the ones we had. They weren't really sustainable. But we saw this as a different and unique model, right? So what we ended up doing was establishing a separate legal entity called Blue Gold Ventures. And then a board of directors was built for that. Almost all Marquette supporters and alumni. And then so Blue Gold Brewing became the LLC within that, and that became the legal company that we could hire the students through. The interesting collaboration then is like Innovation Alley, I began talking to the College of Business, like who are the students that are going to lean into this and get really involved in this? And so we were really putting the business together as we were trying to launch the students into doing the work. And so that's what was really fun and unique about it. And I do think, to some extent, I haven't seen this model, anywhere else. And then there's a lot of factors about the way we thought the business would play out that made it, attractive from a risk perspective. It's like, okay, are Marquette alumni going to want to buy a Marquette affiliated beer? Mm-hmm. That's a yes, right? I mean, we knew we had a market segment, but what people have to understand is how much work our students did to tap into that. I mean, I don't think they could have come up with a better brand.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great that the basketball team was having an amazing season.
Yep.
But we told them it's got to be something that hits people in the heart, and so all of the design decisions that you see around the branding and how they wanted to position the beer, I mean, that was all the students, with minimal input, from the beer board, just kind of giving them some guide points.
So let's get into this then a little bit. Jackson, I've got a number of questions for you as we get into this, because as I was looking at this, I mean, you were really involved in every aspect of the craft beer brewing process, right? We're talking market research, product selection, naming, supply chain, finance, graphic design, literally everything, not just, coming up with a cool name, making the beer and distributing it on National Marquette Day. So I guess my question is, let's start with a fun one. How did you come up with the name around it and things like that? Let's start with it, where the name and the style. Let's go there.
Okay. I think the style came first, so we'll start with that. So pretty much everyone involved, the brewers, the beer mentor, the brew board, Paul Jones, John.
Those of us who hitched a ride along the way.
Free beer.
We actually met together upstairs here.
Okay.
And I think a couple of the brewers had grabbed a variety of different 4-packs of a variety of different beers and different types and different flavor accents and all sorts of stuff. And so we just basically started pouring them and going around the table and trying them and giving our thoughts and saying, too strong, too selective of a flavor. And I think ultimately what we came to was, first of all, the idea that we wanted to go with something that would be suitable for anyone to enjoy.
Yeah.
Even if you're not the biggest beer fan, but you don't mind it, or even if you don't really like beer, but you want to try it, you might still be able to like it. And I think we really ended up hitting that nail on the head. And so we ended up kind of saying, we really like this cream ale, we really like this golden ale. And so we kind of want to do something mixing these two together. And then, I mean, I don't know what the popular belief is about this, but the students were not professional brewers prior to this. So the head brewers of, I believe this is how it kind of came together, of the 3 breweries kind of worked together, drafted a recipe, brewed it, and it was pretty much all we hoped it to be and more. But yeah, it is a golden ale, but I think we have a little bit of a cream ale in there as well.
Yeah.
And then going into the name, it was honestly simpler than I thought personally. simpler than I thought it would be. You know, a lot of names you're like, come up like, oh, that's a cool idea, but now let's come up with something better. The three other students and myself ended up meeting in Innovation Alley at Marquette in a conference room there, and just sat down with a dry erase board and our computers and just threw names and ideas out there. Even some wacky ones like regarding the Warriors or the Avalanche, which Marquette were previously known as.
Sure.
Which weren't necessarily serious, but just to get the ideas flowing. And we started with, like, we liked the basketball theme from the start. So we were looking at basketball, jerseys, team names, player names, everything. And we were like, okay, well, they won last time in '77, the NCAA National Championship. So we're thinking that's something. That could be something. And then it's a gold nail / cream ale.
Just call it a golden ale.
We're the
Good
Golden
branding.
Eagles.
Yeah.
And we were thinking Golden Eagles, and then we're like, what about 77 Golden? Or 77 Gold?
Yeah.
And we went through a couple different iterations of that and ended on 77 Golden Ale and kind of presented it to the brew board and to everyone involved. And everyone loved it.
Did it just feel right?
It
Was
did.
that- okay. Because I like all the
Certainly.
detail that you went through there and coming up with the right brand, but once you landed on it, you're like, this is it.
Yeah.
At least that's the sense I got from your story.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we just knew, a lot of Marquette people are basketball fans, or they're at the very least Marquette basketball fans.
Right.
And so I think we knew that it would be popular. We knew that people would at least have a general idea of what we were trying to hit there. And yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a home run, and we kind of told them, like, first time around, it's got to be a home run. People got to know.
Yeah.
If you look at the beer, it doesn't say Marquette beer anywhere.
Right. Right.
Because it's
I actually just realized that now that you pointed it out.
It's
I'm
affiliated with Marquette,
Yeah.
but we were not using the Marquette logo.
like, right.
And so it was like, it's got to be so obvious, what this beer is about.
Yeah.
And who it's connected to, and they killed it. Like,
Yeah.
they couldn't have done a better job. I remember at one point you talked about cold. On the top you'll see cold, gold, and bold. And for a while, that was the name for a little bit, I think.
We were
like,
thinking
played
that.
around with that, but at the end of
It's
the
a
day,
good rim around the can
Yeah.
slogan. I'll put it that
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
Or maybe an iteration in the future if Blue and Gold Brewing
Sure.
does another beer. We'll
Yeah.
get to that later.
Yeah.
That's, I kind of jumped ahead there, right? Because the name, the style, that's the really exciting part. But I rattled off all the other things that go into brewing. So,
Correct, yeah.
One of my questions, Jax, maybe you lead off on this one, and then John,
Sure.
you fill in as well.
Okay.
But how do you put a timeline and a structure around something like this to ensure its likelihood of success, right? What were the things you did early on to make sure that, hey, there's a timeline that we can achieve before this big basketball game that Marquette is playing in February?
Okay. I think from the start, we did a good job, maybe not the students per se, but more the beer board, the beer mentors. They did a good job of setting the most important tasks up front at first. They said, yeah, we got to do all this stuff later on, but we can't do any of that until we do this. We choose the type of beer. We even the labeling, you really can't get our designs and everything out there to be marketing if we have no idea what the beer is going to be called, what it's going to look like. Because our hope was to be able to hint to people, get people excited, put little seeds out there for them to pick up and be like, oh, okay, I think something's going on here. Ultimately, we worked together. We had quite a few, basically all staff meetings, and put together kind of the stages that we needed to go through. So that included initial marketing. Really everything. But creating that plan was what allowed us to actually focus on things instead of just being completely overwhelmed by all the different tasks that we had to get done and having each student or each member of the group working on different things. Because that was a concern that I had at first, is like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what I should focus on now. And I think with input from everyone in the group, all of the professionals at Marquette, in the beer industry, the beer mentor, they really clarified what we needed to focus on. And then from there we were able to say, okay, here's going to be our schedule. We're going to do this, drew up our social media plan, which surprisingly enough, drawing out a plan from start to launch before we even started posting anything was immensely helpful.
Yeah.
Because we were able to see what we needed to do and then know where we needed to focus our time at certain periods. And along the way, we saw what kind of reactions we were getting from what we were posting, and we were able to sort of critique the things we were posting in order to get more attraction. And I think having a little bit of difference on the different social media platforms where we posted and the way we worded things and what we actually posted image-wise, I think it really allowed us to figure out what would work best.
Yeah, definitely. I think follow up on that. You think about learning in a college environment, it's really structured. You got learning outcomes, you have a syllabus. I mean, that's all been designed to take a student and kind of take them from where they are when they start a class and where they're going to be at the end. There's a lot of ambiguity in a project like this.
Right.
And what the students had to do, and they did really, really well, was they leaned into the fact that this was discovery-driven learning. And they had the people to ask the questions to. And at first I think you would agree, like, once it got going. But at first, there's a lot of ambiguity. But you have to start asking questions. You have to start charting out a path. And I think that's that real world experience that's going to benefit the students when they go into a job in the real world. And I hope that provided that to you guys. But I have to say the beer board was phenomenal. So much learning had to happen, and they responded. They were always available, always interacting with the students, so they could come up with a question out of nowhere and they could get an answer. And then Chuck Swoboda, who acted as the beer mentor on the project, was just great at asking them, the students, really difficult questions.
Yeah.
And Chuck has some experience in the beer industry, so he knew how to push it further. And I think I really appreciate him for that, for coming in and kind of taking where we were, but just challenge them even more to even push like where we thought. I mean, he pushed me where we thought we could take it. And that was so valuable for us.
And to hit on Chuck real quick, I think one of the biggest things that he was incredibly good at that helped us to clear up that ambiguity was, and this can be annoying for most people, but it is extremely effective and unannoying with Chuck. He will answer your question with the right question that prompts your mind, and you start thinking, and you're like, wow, I had the own answer in my head. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's funny that you bring up Chuck. Some of our longtime listeners of Manufacturing Happy Hour might remember him from back in episode 13 or something like that. And we did actually a live podcast in front of an audience. It's harder to answer questions Chuck asks you when it's a tough question in front of 100 people.
Yeah, so
I know exactly what you're saying when he does a good job of asking the right questions. And, to recap some of the things I learned from what you were saying, you had the beer board, you had mentors, you had that group of people to tap into to clear up ambiguity. But also, just starting, learning how to ask the right questions, which arguably is the most valuable thing anyone can learn for their career. Just cool hearing how those things played in there and how you had the right group of mentors, because, that's the type of thing that when someone leaves college, or even when they're in college, for example, it's about finding those people that can help you take your career to the next level.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Cool to hear about how important they were to this part of the process. I want to reflect a little bit on classroom learning as well. So Jackson, another question for you. Was there a part of the project where you were like, wow, this feels completely different from something that I learned in the classroom? This is not what I expected, but this provided the learning opportunity for that.
I think there were a lot of points throughout this process when I thought that and I felt that. I think I've always kind of been an entrepreneurial spirit, so that's the stuff I've pursued in work and in jobs, internships, that sort of thing prior to this point. So I've kind of had that feeling quite a bit through my experiences, but this was different in the sense that it was real. It was all out there. It wasn't, okay, suppose you're in this business and you're running this and you have to do this, or going through a simulation in class or group projects or anything like that. It was completely different. And the fact that the people in charge, or whatever you want to say, such as John and everyone else, the people who were more senior to us, more like adult, if you want to say
had their
that.
degrees in hand already.
Supporters.
Our supporters were very confident and open and relaxed with letting us know that they believed that we were going to figure this out, we were going to do it, that we had what it took to do it. And I think just knowing that whatever we decided they were cool with, I think having that confidence was really helpful. And I think that might be something that isn't as instilled in every class or by every professor. There are the people that stick out and do that really well. It was
a different risk calculation versus what you get in a classroom, I think. And
for sure, yeah.
I don't know. What I appreciated about it is, I saw a lot of learning in you guys, and I mentioned this, but you could have just been part of it, and you could have just said, "Oh, cool! I got to be on this beer project. That was cool." Hang that on your awesome college experience hat. But you didn't. You guys didn't stop there. You wanted to learn, and you leaned into it. And like that, that right in there is a learning lesson of you're going to get what you put into it. And these, as far as I know, you guys really didn't know each other much, even the students, before we literally threw them on a team together and said, "Here's your challenge."
How did these 4 students come together? I have to ask that, right?
Truthfully, recommendations from faculty.
Okay.
Because a lot of the stuff I do in Innovation Alley, because we're growing, I rely on faculty recommendation because they know these students so well. And I have to say, this is probably a kudos to Marquette faculty. It's not just, they're getting a good grade in my class. It's more, they're this type of person. And you do need a type of person to want to be involved in this if you want it, to be successful. But if you want them to get the most out of it, they can get too.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I would say that, I personally got drawn into it from an email sent out by one of my professors. He sent it out to the whole class. "Hey, if anyone's interested in working on a student-run beer beer project, let me know." And at the time, I was considering getting an internship during the semester in commercial real estate. And I'm like, I can do real estate the rest of my life if that's what I end up going into. This sounds pretty awesome. I'm gonna at least say yes and try to get more information about it.
Yeah.
And I guess it got passed on from one of my professors to another one of my professors, and then up to John. And we had an initial discussion over the phone after playing phone tag for about a week, and it was
I'm more of an intuition interviewer, so I sat down and I just why would you want to do this? Well, this is what it's going to be about. Why would you be interested in this? And then I like to get a vibe for the person. So I'm not going to pretend we had some, immaculate interview process, and we whittled it down. And no, I think, for this one, it was having the right people and, call it serendipity, but we had that on the team, definitely.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Throwing your hat in the ring is half the battle a lot of times, right? Just raising your hand when an opportunity that looks cool comes your way and you want to explore it more.
I would touch on real quick something that really helped team-wise was we were all I think similar people to a certain extent, but all very different in our interests and I think our specific talents when it came to putting this project together and doing the work. I think we all presented a really different perspective from each other. And I think the disagreements that we had and the agreements that we had and the problem solving really allowed us to function really well as a team. And luck, call it John's a genius. I don't know.
It's definitely not that. It's definitely not that.
Well, I think, one of the lessons I've learned over time, it's if your co-founder or your business partners, whatever they are, if they have the same skill set, background, worldview that you have, you're probably in trouble. You want to find people that bring those different perspectives, and I think it's really cool that you articulated that, hey, you had similarities, but you're also bringing something different to the table. I want to try to elicit another story from this as I'm thinking about it. I've got to think there were moments where you might have been thinking to yourself, there's no way we're going to pull this off. What are we going to do? Can you share a story of a challenge that you encountered during the project and how you overcame it or what you learned from it?
Go for it. I'd be interested to hear it.
That's a hard one. I'm curious if you have any ideas here.
Yeah, did anything bleed over that you heard about, John?
No, I'm going to be honest. We always saw this as a learning project, and there's obviously concerns about college students and alcohol. Now, everyone on the team was 21, but we worried about that, because we didn't want the perception to be that this was just about beer, the beer's the end product. Full disclosure, we got a lot of support across our university campus. And, Dr. Lovell, once, he heard about it and learned more about it. He was really supportive of it. And so I was just, that was a problem I perceived, having worked in university campus for a long time, we might run into.
Sure.
But the level of, the way the students brought themselves to the project, the seriousness that they took it, I knew right away it was going to be a win. So I don't think besides those initial hesitations, I mean, we probably had the same ones you did. Like when the beer's getting brewed and you got your marketing going and you kind of see a buzz, but then where are we going to be able to get it? Can we get it in Pfizer? If we can't get, what are we? I mean, there was a point I think all of us were like, is this really happening? Is it going to happen?
Yeah.
What wrong might happen, right? Like you start thinking about that.
Sure.
And then I just know from my perspective, the day I walked over to the Deer District on National Marquette Day, I took one peek in Good City and saw all the 77s laying around. I was like, I think we're in a good space. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was one of those 77s at Good City Brewing that day, to be very clear. So, no, it was, as an alumni, when I saw it, I'm like, this is a home run. I can't wait to drink this and things like that. So, okay, so it was maybe some concerns on how is this whole thing going to play out. And
just perceptions. I knew how we were approaching it, and I knew that the learning was front and center. Mm-hmm. And that was front and center the whole time, and the learning was amazing for the students. So as much as, you have hesitations, mine were unfounded, I think, in the long run. I'd love to hear, though, if you had a moment you were stressed out or the team was stressed out.
Or you're pulling an all-nighter or something like that.
I think...
I just think back to my projects. There were some where I certainly wasn't getting the sleep that I needed during that time.
It was... So to hit that point real quick, I would say this whole journey, this whole process was honestly a blast. Knowing what it was once we started meeting and getting in there, I thought it was going to be a lot more work than it actually was. And you know what? That could just be because I enjoyed the work and because I was passionate about it and we were building something. And I do believe that it was it, but most of it didn't really feel like work. It was really enjoyable. And then drawing back a little bit, the only thing I can think of where I was like, was when maybe 3 days before launch is the Pfizer issue a fair game?
We were just trying to figure out how much they wanted. Yeah, let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Supply and demand, figuring out where the supply needed to go.
And we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out. It's a supply chain issue. We'll how much should we get there?
That's a challenge. Everyone's had supply chain challenges
that comes through the
recently.
perspective of they have a lot of relationships and they have vendors and distributors and. We just had to work through. At one point, it was like, we think it's going to happen. And then a few days before, it was like, well, maybe it's not going to happen, but you're planning for it to happen. And everything worked out great. And they were great partners in it. Yeah,
sure,
they really
absolutely.
were. But definitely,
absolutely.
When you think about from a branding perspective, a launch perspective, like, we might get this. Yeah. This could be a big deal for us. You plan for it. But you're still not quite confirmed on it. I think that created some trepidation.
Sure. Like launch day jitters or lead up to launch jitters, right? You're going to have it in some awesome breweries, but hey, are we going to get it in this other spot? Are we going to get it in the arena? I think that totally counts as one of those scenarios where like, what are we going to do, right?
Yeah, and I think it hits a totally different kind of level of achievement because it's National Marquette Day, which is a huge Marquette student, alumni, parent, everything day where they all come together, they all spend time together, go to the game, huge game. Probably the most packed the stadium ever is, unless the Bucks are in the Bucks are taking the lead. And I think that really gave us another level of achievement that we would not have.
And we got to thank them in that sense for being a partner.
Yeah,
being a great partner to us. They are in general to the university, but they helped us really. Make the launch.
If they didn't want to, we would. If they didn't want to actually go out of their way to help us, I don't think that this would have happened. Yeah. We would have been in there.
Well, I got another question then. And this one is, what did it feel like to get the finished product out there, right? Like, I want to hear, you kind of shared some of your perspectives already, John. Jackson, I want to hear it from you as one of the 4 students in the project.
It was surreal, to say the least. So earlier, a week or so before actual launch was when the beer was finally ready. So it wasn't a long time. We were on a quick schedule.
Yeah, ales don't take that long to sort of lager.
And I think the students and the other students and I on the team, we all went to a good city where the beer had been brewed and met there with Paul Jones, and a Marquette photographer, and we tasted the beer for the first time, and we're taking pictures and just trying to get some good content, and we were all just like giddy, like just happy, laughing.
Yeah, you gotta
like,
see these pictures. They were pumped.
I do.
They were just so pumped.
And I think that was the first like kind of surreal moment when we're all like, holy cow, like wow, like we actually like this is here, like and it's good, like oh my gosh. And then on launch day, we all were kind of doing something different to a certain extent, the student wise. So there were two like alumni events, one a young alumni event and one just normal alumni event. One was at the Mecca and one was at Red, White, and Blue. And I was at the Mecca with Gracie. We were selling shirts, and if you bought a shirt, we'd get you a koozie with it. Just giving out koozies, like just having a good time, talking to people. And then I got to speak there as well in front of like 400 people, which I've never done before. So it was scary, but it was just exciting and surreal. And my family was there, and I was so glad they were able to come and watch me. And just the fact that like Marquette, like specifically John and Paul and these brewers and the people who made this happen, it was a very, very different experience from anything else I've done, internship-wise, work-wise, anything else through Marquette. And I know for a fact that the three other students can attest to that as well, and that this is something that is, I mean, it's not going to change. It most likely won't change the entire. I mean, I'm not going to say that, actually, because I'm, like, having different job ideas and stuff right now.
Sure. Wheels are turning.
It was huge. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and it was way, way, way more than I ever thought it would have come to be.
Yeah.
So launch day was just surreal. I still think about it. I'm like, wow, that was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, things aligned. I mean, you're working with 3 different breweries. You're working with, university personnel. You're working with, we're working internally with our sports people Learfield that we work with. We're working with the Fiserv. We're working with, Beechwood, who's the distributor for. I mean, so like, this is not like a straightforward this is created and it just shows up places. It was really amazing. I was as impressed to see, and as honestly excited to see it come to life. I mean, when you work in higher education, you get to do some amazing stuff. Universities are awesome. A project like this, did I ever think that I would be part of a project like this? No, of course not. I think I said the other day, like, this is one of the coolest student learning related projects I've ever been on in my career. So, I mean, I feel just as lucky that we were able to, all come together, all these different entities, and make this experience happen.
Super cool. Well, I've got a few wrap-up questions as we get towards the end here. One of them is, Jackson, you were part of a 4-person team, and I'm curious, how was everyone else able to kind of follow this and learn from it? There are a lot of other students at Marquette, right? So, how are other people able to learn? And maybe, John, you can talk to this. You mentioned a little bit at the start, like what other programs are there to get that real-world experience?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of the beer project directly, we're currently still in the process of what sustainability look like. I mean, our goal is to run a similar model every year, similar team size. I mean, we want many students to be able to be interested and put their name in the hat, but the quality of this experience is kind of reflected, I think, in the more boutique and smaller nature of it. Yeah. But it's creating a replicable model of ways that we can kind of approach this. So I'll just say, this is always going to be a project. I think we'll continue to explore other potential product lines, maybe.
Okay.
I think the other thing I'll say is, like, this is just one student-run business. We think there are many student-run businesses out there that could come into life, and so that's where more of it exists. And I would just then again say, Innovation Alley, we're getting things going. But my goal is to build out, rich applied opportunities. And so one of the programs I'm running right now, it's called the Interchange, and it's literally we partner with an organization that has a challenge. It's multidisciplinary. We go out, we build the student team from around the various areas on campus where we think that multidisciplinary team can work on that project. And then they step into that same idea, that discovery-driven problem solving. The context can be completely different, but that's been a really exciting pilot for me because I see the same type of learning that this program was supporting happening in these other projects, and these vary greatly. And I had a student say, I mean, I could work I could work in the cafeteria, or I could work on something like this, right? And that's kind of the idea, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think, I will say, last thing I will say is I think student compensation is really important. They're doing a lot of real work. They deserve to be compensated for that. And it also creates equity and creates access. So a student who has to work at the coffee shop, if I'm not able to pay them for an opportunity, they may have to keep that job. They may not be able to do that. And I just think it's a way to get more inclusive with the types of students that can be engaged.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it would have been really hard, time-wise, to commit to something like this.
Well, especially if you're weighing your major, right? You're looking at real estate, right? You're like, well, do I do this and not get paid? Theoretically, right? Obviously, this was paid, right? Do I do this or do I do the real estate job that would get me paid, right? So I think it totally makes sense. I'm glad you brought up that point. One thing I want to ask, and this is because I'm an engineering student, I think I saw in this cohort it was 4 business students. How do we break down the walls between colleges and get engineering students and other majors involved?
That's a great question. I think this project lent itself to business students, and Gracie was our designer. And so she came from comms, joint program between MyAd and College Communication. She was fantastic. Some other projects of a more technical nature I've worked on, and those have included, electrical engineering students interacting with marketing students and business students. So I think those opportunities live in a different space. I think this project, unless we were developing a new technology, but I'll say again though, but I will say again, I have no qualms with an engineering student saying, I want to be part of this because I can bring valuable skills, that may be partially disciplinary, but may just be the skills I have to bear on a project because I can manage and I can lead and I can communicate. And we often forget how important those skills are in the workplace, because when you're in college, it's your major. But when you leave college, it's kind of your major and then all the other things you can do really well that make you a leader. And so, I've never been opposed to the idea that just because I study engineering or I study history, that should exclude me from an applied project.
Sure.
100%. I 100% agree with that. And, I mean, not only do they have valuable skills and experiences to bring to the table, but no matter who you are, any sort of experience like this in applied learning and working with other students and learning along the way with other people, you're going to take an immense amount of experiences that are valuable to you in a variety of different ways away from it. I mean,
and the only thing I want to add though too is I don't want people to think that there's not applied learning throughout Marquette, because there is. Students get it in their classes, and they, it's all over. And I get that question about Innovation Alley. So it's like Innovation Alley, where innovation lives at Marquette? Absolutely not, right? It's not my job to control innovation. So it's just, I think this was such a unique way where it was so completely devoid of the traditional academic curricula and context of the classroom that it did make it quite novel in that sense.
Touching on that, it exists all over. I mean, obviously, business is kind of there. People think of business, they think of innovation. That obviously, to a certain extent, engineering in the same sense. In reference to the business school, Marquette, I mean, they started the first real estate asset program. So it's like an AIM program, which Marquette also has, Applied Investment Management. But it's a student-run investment team, and they look at commercial real estate properties, whether that's multifamily, industrial, whatever they're looking at, and they try to evaluate these properties. And ultimately, because of the immense generosity of Marquette donors, they're able to actually purchase these properties
make real
through
investments
a fund and receive returns for the university and for these funds, so that they can grow it and allow these next generations of students and these next years of students to have more to work with and to be able to do more. And I mean, those are the things like that. First program in the country. It's 2 years old. And students coming from something like that, I mean, would you rather, say you're a top-notch, commercial real estate firm. Would you rather hire someone who has legitimate, proven, showable experience analyzing properties and purchasing them and managing them, or someone who's just learned about it? I mean, it's there's no question.
brainer.
Yeah.
Is this the future of higher education? More applied learning programs? I mean, on this podcast we talk about trades coming back and things like that. So, is applied learning the future of higher education?
I study higher ed actually for my dissertation work, and I don't think it's the future. I don't think we've ever left it, but I think as industry demands change, the ability of higher education to adapt to those demands in a quick way is sometimes constrained, just because of the way we've evolved over time, and I think the core is always going to be, the way I talk about it is the core is always going to be this traditional, wonderful undergraduate experience you get that mixes in these things, but where universities, college, where they're going to be able to separate themselves out is how much closer they can bring the graduate they have to the graduate that business needs immediately stepping in on day one, and so I think of students who are, ready to ask the questions, right? Ready to engage, understand the relationship of what they do to the rest of the business, be okay with ambiguity, develop into amazing leaders, understand the role technology plays. We don't live in a world where you can ignore technology. It's everywhere all around us all the time. So, I think the future of higher ed is going to be creating that incremental value that complements the undergraduate education. At least that's my opinion, and that's the way I think about it.
I would agree for the most part. I think to a certain extent, this applied learning and these having these opportunities for students or potential students, I think in many ways, for engineering schools, for business schools, for nursing, for medicine, and obviously in nursing and medicine, those ones are already pretty present. I think it's going to become non-negotiable to a certain extent because of the fact with the changing in technology and the changing of the grasp of how close information is to you. It's becoming smaller and smaller and closer and closer. And I mean, if you think about like AI right now, professors around the country and high school teachers and middle school and elementary school teachers, maybe not elementary, like middle and high, are freaking out because everyone's got access to artificial intelligence now that gives them the answer to,
virtually anything.
Virtually anything. And, I think that's going to present a front that colleges are going to have to adapt in order to survive or at least to prosper and thrive.
Yeah, and what I'll say with that, which is really interesting, is people think about having to change, but I see it as evolution. When you evolve at your core, you're the same. So I think what will never lose value is what 500 years of Jesuit education has done already.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
How do you adapt to the challenges and the changing context? I thought it was a really insightful point. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
No, this is great, and AI is actually a very popular topic on this show as well. So I'm glad you were able to find a way to work that. Beer is a very popular topic too, so we're covering all the bases.
I feel like
today.
beer's the mainstay, right?
and this is a little bit of a side piece that I was thinking about, but talking about blue collar, the shortage of blue collar workers that we are coming upon. And I think kind of the extreme push that we tend to see in a lot of high schools of students to go to college as opposed to pursuing things like that. I uniquely experienced a little bit of a different thing at my high school. I'm from Hampshire, Illinois, kind of right where it goes from anything resembling a suburb to pure farmland and country. And we had machining class, we had welding, we had woodworks.
Really?
Yeah, we had automotives where they would actually bring in cars. You work on cars. You learn to start with lawnmower engines, move up to cars, and so on. And I think that's something, again, similar to what we're talking about with universities, is a shift that needs to happen in schools because there's nothing wrong with going either direction. But just because college is right for someone doesn't mean it's right for someone else. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people get drawn into working up these ladders and in these worlds that they don't really enjoy. And I think a lot more people could be a lot more happy working with their hands. And that was one of the things that I loved about this project. I love working with my hands, and it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is I did not expect the conversation to take this turn, but it's cool to hear because in the manufacturing industry, this is a little insight into what the show's usually like, right? We're constantly talking about how there aren't enough skilled trades workers to jump in. But you're, just out of curiosity, how did you become aware of that before you're even in industry? Was it through high school? Is it something that's being taught in universities right now?
I think a bit of both. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts on a lot of different subjects, and I hear a lot of people from different walks of life speak. And then even closer to home, my best friend, shout out Matt. He is an HVAC tech, and he's a year older than me, so he's 23 now. Went to school for it for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year, something along those lines. I don't want to sound short. And then transitioned, moved down to Texas, was doing commercial, and came back. And the amount that I've seen him is change and grow and learn as a person and quite literally develop his intellect is astounding. And I think there's a little bit too much of this old stigma that you go to college to learn, you go here to work.
Yeah.
You're going to work and learn in both places.
I agree with that.
Awesome. Loving the way we're wrapping this up. I do want to hear about some of your lessons or lessons for the audience that you might be able to share. So, John, I'll start with you.
Sure.
I didn't necessarily plan on asking this one, but, what advice would you give to other universities that are still trying to get with this type of program, right? What are the things you think you've done right with Innovation Alley that you're like, gosh, this is one thing I'd recommend for, because the educator portion of our audience that's out there thinking, man, what can we do to do better and provide more real-world experience?
I think it's just recognizing that oftentimes you will be your own barrier. So adopt a different operational methodology. We talk a lot about let's think big, let's start small, and then let's discern on it and scale it and grow it. And this was a big idea, but we didn't have to make it this huge thing operationally. Like we figured out a way to do it where it was definitely desirable and it was feasible in how we designed it. Viability is a long-term concept. And, I think we're lucky enough that we've seen such positive value that now we see the viability in the long run. We just, you remember, I wear an innovation hat, so I'm always trying to think outside of the status quo and the box. And what I found is that there are incredibly innovative ways to do things that aren't necessarily all that tangentially different from some of the things we already do. So my advice simply is it's okay to have a big idea. Don't shut that idea down with, how's that ever going to happen? Because that's a type of self-gating that I think in higher ed from my experience, we get involved in that a lot. And I think universities that are growing in their innovation capacities, and I'll say I've seen this at Marquette, is a lot more of the excitement around how do we make this happen? Like not how are we not going to be able to do this, but how are we going to be able to do this? And it's just a different mindset. That's all it is. And again, this couldn't have happened though without a lot of support of a whole variety of people, both internal and external to the university. Giving some trust and seeing the value in the experience we were trying to build for the students.
Awesome. Think outside the box. I said Bucks. I'm in Milwaukee mode right now. Think outside the box. Trust, alumni, a lot of factors that play into this. Jackson, a little bit of a different question for you. You're commercial real estate and finance. That's your major, I believe.
Correct.
Is that
majors? Yeah, it's a double major.
Double major, right. What advice would you give to college students that are thinking of pursuing a project that are outside of their specific major? Right? I get there's a little finance involved in this, but to an extent, this is kind of it's a little pivot from what you're studying to do.
Yeah, most certainly. This ties into what John just previously said, and something that I've heard from Chuck Swoboda. Just stop pretending that the box exists, that you need to think outside the box. Just crush it. Throw it in the garbage. Pretend there's no box there. Just because something isn't supposedly fitting to what you're studying or what you think you're going to do does not mean that you will not draw or cannot draw an immense benefit in a lot of different ways. Experiences, I think having different experiences is what sets a lot of people apart and what gives them different perspectives, which make all the difference in jobs, in life, and relationships. I think that we all get this two in our heads. I got to do this. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm in real estate. I should do commercial real estate internship. Whereas I believe, and I've talked to a couple people who in commercial real estate who agree that this is a far more beneficial experience. People are going to be like, wow, that's awesome, you did that, instead of doing this, when you're just going to go into your job and learn to do that anyway. And, there's pros and cons to both. Everything has pros and cons, and that's what life's really about. To a certain extent. But if something interests you, chase after it, because that right there is what life's really about. the people who interest you, the experiences that interest you, the things you like doing. You never know where it's going to take you. You never know. And I think that's really what it's about.
I remember when I was interviewing for one of my first jobs, and I had a pretty solid one-page resume, right? I'd interned at Anheuser-Busch and things like that, but one of the interviewers was looking at it, and the thing that individual called out was he was like, it's cool that you were a bartender. You probably learned a lot about dealing with unruly people and things like that, right? So every experience is worth something. I think you guys have
100%.
highlighted that extremely well in this interview. Final question. What's the future of Blue and Gold Brewing, right? Are we going to see another beer? And maybe we don't know what the answer is yet today, but I mean, I loved 77, so I'm just hoping I'm going to get to have more of it or another iteration at some point.
I think you will see another beer. It won't be 77. It'll be a completely new product, new branding, new identity. But yeah, you can expect this thing to keep going.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, thank you both for taking the time to jump on the show. Final cheers.
Cheers.
And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.